I'll begin by saying Adele Perry Nadishnikas, Gawin ni Dudimsi, Winnipeg Ninduji, Zaganash Kwe Nindwa. In my very, very basic Anishinaabe Moan, that is a way of saying my name's Adele Perry. I don't know my clan. I live in Winnipeg and I'm a non-Indigenous or white woman. And the other hats I wear is I'm a professor of history and women's and gender studies at the University of Manitoba and the director for the Center for Human Rights Research there. The Center for Human Rights Research is, like many things these days, currently online, but we broadcast to you from the territories of the Anishinaabe and Innu and Métis people, governed by the promises of Treaty 1 and the Manitoba Act, and we drink water from Shoal Lake in Treaty number 3. And it is amid all these histories and what they mean for the present that we have the honor today of bringing to you a conversation with Isha Khan. In August of this very eventful year, which people will be talking about for some time to come, Ms. Khan was named the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. She brings to this position her long experience working in human rights and addressing issues of racism, sexism, and inclusion. She was, amongst other things, Executive Director and Senior Counsel for the Manitoba Human Rights Commission, and has served on the Law Society of Manitoba's Equity Committee, and is a founding member of the Canadian Council for Muslim Women, and has taught at the University of Winnipeg. And she is also an alumnus of both the University of Manitoba and the University of Victoria. And we have the real honor and pleasure of being able to present a conversation with Isha and the Center for Human Rights Research and the University of Manitoba. So I just want to begin by asking you a little bit about what kind of relationship does the CMHR have with researchers and scholars, including those based at universities and beyond? How will those be kind of enhanced or maybe shifted under your leadership?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. That was one of the things that I didn't know a lot about when I took on the position. Like many, I had kind of watched the museum from afar and had been in the walls of the museum proper, but didn't understand those relationships. I'm really happy to say that we have deep relationships with the academic community because of the way in which we approach our work. So on any number of exhibitions that are being planned and worked on, and as I learn more about the museology aspect of the work that we do, it means that we reach out in our storytelling to researchers, to academics, to people with lived experience, and that we do that alongside of them. So we've got our own researchers and curatorial staff, and they work with academics in various fields, and where we don't have internal expertise, then we look, reach out even further to make those relationships so that we can take a balanced approach to the work that we do and to be informed about the stories that we need to tell.
Yeah, thank you. So we know that you studied at the University of Manitoba back in the day, and we were wondering if you could share a memory from your undergraduate days at the University of Manitoba.
I was thinking about that. So I started at the U of M probably in 1991. I spent some years there, I guess, doing my undergraduate degree. I have so many memories. Mm-hmm. Most of them are somewhere in the UMSU building, or they're in the Arts Lounge, and they involve really meeting new people and talking about issues. Mm. Even back then, I think about universities, when you think about the pandemic where everything is virtual, and some of that, obviously, we're missing that culture of people sitting around and talking about their courses and talking about, I did a philosophy degree. So there was plenty of time to just sit back late into the night in the Arts Lounge, chatting about issues and our readings. And I look back now and think, I thought I knew it all and I didn't know much of anything. I look back now and think I actually knew more back then than I do now, because I was giving myself space to think about those things. So there's not one memory that stands out, but I spent lots and lots of time on campus at the Fort Garry campus, with friends and making new friends, meeting people in my classes, and talking about the issues of that time and reflecting on history. And like I often say now that I wish I could go back and take my undergraduate courses again. I think with some maturity of thought, or maybe just time spent in other places, like I'm not in the arts lounge, not the arts lounge, there was an arcade in the UMSU building, and I spent a bit too much time playing Tetris or, doing those kinds of things. I think that I would enjoy taking many of those courses again. And so I always tell the young people in my life who are in university, just enjoy the feeling of being in a place where you have freedom to just explore your thoughts and question each other. And it's really pretty amazing time.
So I guess it's a related question. This speaks directly to that point. Do you have any other advice in particular that you might give to current students who are interested in developing their kind of interest in human rights and related issues?
Yeah, whenever I talk to students, when I was, for a while, I was involved in the U of M's mentorship program. So people who wanted to get into human rights would come and chat with me, and we'd meet in my office and say, well, what are you doing? And they're thinking about summer jobs. And I was always really pretty floored by the path that students had set out for themselves. This summer I'm going to have a job here, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go to law school or do my MBA or whatever it may be. And I'd reflect on myself and think, oh, wow, I didn't have myself together when I was your age at all. Maybe I did and didn't realize it, I suppose. But what I always sort of give as advice is diversify your experiences as much as you can, especially if you're interested in the world of human rights. Take that, you have a job, a retail job, or you work in a restaurant, that's a great job in terms of meeting people, working with people who you may not, working or serving, or however it may be, people that you may not normally interact with. Talk to them, listen to them, because that will inform really everything that you do from that point forward. So just basic advice that sometimes it's the experiences, job-wise or volunteer-wise, that don't really look like they're lining you up for a human rights job that actually do. So I give that advice. But I also say, if you are studying in the field of human rights, I found it really helpful sometimes to do the jobs that almost challenged me the most. So, I'm a lawyer, and I thought, oh, I'm never going to work in a big law firm. I'm never going to do anything involving the corporate world. And yet, when I did do some of those things, and I rationalized it to myself, I'm going to get to know the enemy, or however you want to, I need to know the other side. Those were some of the most valuable experiences that I gained, because I learned more about how the world works. And when you're going to advocate for human rights, you need to understand all the waters that you need to navigate. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, sometimes walk into the experiences that you don't think align exactly with where you're going, because you'd be surprised at how they actually position you to get where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess all these questions relate to each other in one way or another, but here's another related one about the particular kind of mission of the CMHR, and its core kind of goal is to document and explore questions of human rights. And since really the museum has opened, it's also been kind of the site of issues around human rights itself, from questions around the build and the site, to discussions around framing histories of Indian residential schools as genocidal or not, to current and ongoing discussions regarding kind of equity and diversity in the workplace. And I guess our question is, what does it mean to lead an institution that has this multiple kind of place within discussions of human rights at this particular moment?
I think what does it mean? It means that the approach we take and the work that we do is meaningful. It's meaningful now at this point in time. It allows us to reflect on these issues of inequity, inequality, injustice that have persevered through the ages, and yet, you know, I don't know if we're making a dent in them the way that we had hoped. You know, I came to the museum with really optimism and real excitement about the immense potential that this museum has to touch the lives of others, to create, to be a space where people can reflect on our collective past, but to reckon with it and dialogue, to learn and hopefully inspire some action. And so to be part of that, to me, it's a huge privilege. I take real responsibility that I want to make something of that privilege I've been given to be part of convening those kinds of conversations. You know, I think when people talk about the museum's past, that's past the museum does and needs to take responsibility for. You know, there is a story about how the museum, about the build, about how we got to where we got, acknowledging genocide. But it's a story that we need to own, take responsibility for, and then the work to build the relationships or to repair relationships, it's going to take time, because it involves trust and true, meaningful partnerships, friendships, value. So we're working hard. That's not just under my leadership. That's work that happened before I got here that I'm happy to be part of. And I'm certainly continuing to push in our relationships to really take responsibility. This is a bit of a moment of reckoning for us, right? You know, the events that were in the media over the last summer raised issues, just the prevalence of systemic racism in our own museum. So those aren't new issues, and they're not new to many organizations, cultural institutions in particular. But how we approach them, I think, needs to be different, and that's the work that we're doing now. That's being in it for the long haul. That's being open. That's being accountable for our actions, and constantly asking for that feedback, solicited or unsolicited. You know, people won't see themselves in the work that we do unless they feel like they have a space for that dialogue. That's what we're working to do.
Great. I mean, these are questions that are particular within the context of the CMHR, but recent events that have been happening, including, you know, at the Royal Museum in Victoria, British Columbia, and elsewhere globally, kind of suggest this is a bit of a moment for museums as institutions. Is that a wider context? And if that's the case, how does the CMHR fit within that wider conversations that's happening about museums?
Yeah, I mean, museums, arts and cultural institutions, they're interesting in the sense that, you know, they have their own, you know, they come from a history of colonization, and the way that we look at telling the story of another's culture, and the idea of taking collections and artifacts. So certainly there is all over the museum, the world of museums and the arts and culture sector generally, there is this, there's new dialogue, there's new discussion about being inclusive and making sure that we have diverse perspectives. I think the CMHR is unique in its mandate that it's, you know, a newer museum. right? A museum dedicated solely to human rights means that it's already embedded in the nature of the CMHR that we're convening these conversations. We're storytellers, really, and we're doing it with communities. We're telling the stories of others because they're stories that need to be told, so that we can learn from them, reflect on our past, learn from it, and inspire others to act. So yeah, so when I think about what's happening in other museums, I mean, it's not surprising. I think that it's just really time for us to take a different approach. I think that when I think about the questions that are often asked of me, you know, when I walked in the door here a few months ago, you know, have you done training? Did you hire someone to do training? Have you hired some new people that look diverse? You know, how much money are you putting towards diversity? So those are all very important questions. But to me, and what we're building within the museum is shared accountability for this work means we need a bigger framework than just bringing in some trainers. We're in this for the long haul. If we're going to really change the way that we think and the way that we act, then we're going to do it with purpose. It'll be deliberate, it'll take time, and it'll take a lot of hard work. And that we need to really work on relationships along the way. So you know, work that I'm particularly proud of is work around the witness blanket, which really was, you know, it's the story of residential school survivors exhibition. It'll be made digital. There's a traveling exhibition, and then there's a permanent exhibition. But it is a model for working for shared authority. No one owns these pieces. They're not artifacts that are owned by the museum. They're shared. So we worked with an Indigenous artist and storyteller to put that project or exhibition together. And when I talk to him, to Carrie Newman, when I look at that work, its impact and the fact that it's done together, there's something really powerful about that looks a little bit different than what you normally think of when you look at a museum and what an exhibit that, you know, we gave you a bunch of stuff and then you made it look pretty and put it up on a wall or in a glass case. So that's a model really for other work that we might do together.
Absolutely. I guess a final question would be where you might see the CMHR a year from now.
So I see it hopefully from under the pandemic in some ways. But that's probably me being a little bit trite. I think a year from now, I hope that we've built on this momentum that I think we have now, which is to be informed by the community around us. So, you know, all of those people who have constructive criticism or negative criticism or have things to say about how they feel when they walk in the doors of the museum or experience stories online, those are the people we need to listen to. All those people who haven't even thought about the museum because it didn't matter to them, those are the people that we need to draw in. And so I hope that a year from now, and I think about the events going on in the world, the events of the last, well, you can go back in time, but particularly recently, there is a real a swell out there that people want to be part of the discussion around their identity and their rights and what it means. And so, I mean, if you look at the foundations of human rights, it's about, you know, the fact we're born free and equal in our dignity and our rights. And then along the way, those rights get infringed or aren't, or our protections aren't enforced the way they ought to be. Those are all the structures, obviously, that create injustice. I want to see the museum as a place that people look to as a resource. They look to learn and they look to experience the conversations that are right for them at that time in their journey to explore what human rights are. So it's kind of flowery and out there, but I really want the museum to be a space where people can see themselves, and that the stories that we tell the stories that need to be told, that people can learn from, and that people can be part of, and that they can see themselves in the museum.
Well, I know how much you've got on your plate, and I want to thank you for taking this time to speak with us about the important work and in many, many respects that you are undertaking, and that we all share in important ways. So thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.